Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Childless Not by Choice. Before we get started, I would like to thank my sponsors and my supporters. First, I would like to thank Morgan Air Conditioning, Sales, Service, and Installation, serving Tampa, Florida, and the surrounding areas. Morgan Air can be reached by calling 813-500-7765. That's 813-500-7765. Thank you, Morgan Air, for recognizing the vision of Childless Not by Choice and being a part of it. And thank you for all your work in the community. Next, I would like to thank Alba Digital Media for creating my website, www.childlessnotbychoice.net, and for producing this podcast. To contact Alba Digital Media for your web building and podcast production needs, visit www.albadigitalmedia.com. That's www.albadigitalmedia.com. Thank you, Alba Digital Media, for making me look good and sound good. Finally, I would like to thank Devoted, the musical duo who created my theme music. Thank you, Devoted, for your beautiful music and your awesome talent. To contact Devoted for your music needs, email devotedministries@gmail.com. That's devotedministries@gmail.com. And if you would like to become a one-time or ongoing sponsor of Childless Not by Choice, please contact me at Savella@SavellaMorgan.com. That's Savella@SavellaMorgan.com. Thank you so much for listening, and now on to the show. Well, hello everyone, Savella Morgan here. Welcome back to another episode of Childless Not by Choice, where my mission is to recognize and speak to the broken hearts of childless not by choice women and men around the world. I am spreading the great news that we can live a joyful, relevant, and fulfilled life, regardless of the fact that we could not have children. And yes, you heard it correctly here. I said childless not by choice, not 21st century Hannah. I, as many of you know by now, changed the name of my podcast to Childless Not by Choice so that it's more findable and searchable in iTunes and wherever else you search for your podcast. For the very longest time, since the beginning of the podcast, I called it 21st Century Hannah, and I had a tough time moving away from that. And although my platform is still called 21st Century Hannah, I finally acquiesced to my podcast producer's pleadings of the past year to change the podcast name to Childless Not by Choice. And having done that, I have realized almost a quick growth in the platform as far as people joining the newsletter or joining the group. The group is still relatively small, but there are a lot more people joining the group from around the world right now on Facebook. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your patience as the platform continues to evolve. Well, today we have a guest, and I am so honored and so happy to be able to speak with this wonderful lady today that I just met, never knew her before, never met her before. I went to a National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Orlando, Florida, and we just happened to run into each other. I would not have met her if I had not gone to a table to try to win a prize and ran into her at the same table. It was amazing. It's always amazing how those things happen. And we got to talking and we found out that we had a lot in common. So I am so happy to be able to introduce you today to Mrs. Maureen Hornstein. She is originally from a small town in Minnesota here in the United States. And when she went to university, she studied speech, theater, music, and education. And when she graduated, she joined the staff of a faith-based organization called Campus Crusade for Christ International, now known as CRU. Mrs. Maureen and her husband Hank have spent most of their careers living in 3 countries outside of the United States, and currently she is the Women's Asia Strategy Coordinator for the Jesus Film Project. And I actually had my first opportunity ever to go to Campus Crusade for Christ, and I went through and saw what the Jesus Film Project was all about, and what an awesome facility and awesome project. So on that project, she works with various media tools that help women realize that no matter what their family or country may think of them, God, their creator, made them valuable. And if a lot of you who know me, who follow me on social media, you know that I'm a big proponent of women and what's happening to women and girls around the world right now, the horrible things that are happening. So this is just like really up my alley to be able to talk to Mrs. Hornstein today. So, Mrs. Maureen, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Villa. I'm well, thanks. Really
Okay,
happy
so
to be here.
awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So let's get started. Let's get right into the episode and into the questions. And I just want everybody to hear what a wonderful personality you are. And one of the first questions I had was it a conscious decision to work and live outside the United States, you and your husband?
That's a good question.
Mm,
Actually, we spent a summer on a special project in the summer in Thailand. And as a result of that, we thought, why are we living in the US and doing what we're doing there? And
mm.
we began then to be interested in going to the world and living outside of the US.
Okay, so it was just a matter of logistics. And a lot of people would think, wow, that's some big logistics to make a move from your home country to another country, but it seems like the world, the planet is getting smaller and smaller, so it's
Mm,
not such a big deal anymore.
that's really
And
true.
yeah. So in your bio, you say that you help women realize that no matter what their families and cultures may tell them, their creator values them. How exactly do you convey this truth to these women? I mean, is it through the Jesus Film Project or just in your daily life's journey?
Well, actually, I think it's both. I'm so convinced that God um, cares about women that I want them to understand that, both here in the United States as well as around the world. And so I mostly do that through some films that I work with. However, I also talk about it. So
Mhm.
I work with a film in particular called Magdalena. It's either through her eyes or at least from shame. It has a number of different names around
Mhm.
the world, but Magdalena was a follower of Jesus. She became a follower of Jesus when Jesus healed her from 7 demons that were controlling her life. And she was so changed and so grateful that she began to uh, follow Jesus. And through her story, it's one of the ways that conveys, because it shows how Jesus interacts with various different women. He was a real culture changer.
Mhm.
During
Sure.
his day, religious leaders or people in that culture were not, women just didn't have any standing. And yet he spoke with them, he interacted with them. So I, if a woman understands if her family is against her, or the country she lives in thinks that a woman has no value, when she realizes that God, the one who created the universe, the
Mhm.
God of all, thinks that she's valuable, and if she begins to believe that, then it doesn't really matter what the people around her say.
That is so true. That's so true. It just really that having that knowledge in your heart can really help you through some difficult moments in your life, especially in particular countries. So that's so very true. And so as we move on here, and I'm reading that book. Oh my gosh, I was just trying to remember the title because your friend gave it. She mailed a copy of it to me. Sharon James's What God Really Thinks About Women.
Mm.
I think
Hmm.
that's the right title. And so I'm reading that now. I wish I could get through it faster, but there's just so much going on. But I'm really enjoying reading it. And I know she sent it to me because I had written a blog, not even knowing that this book existed, on what God really thinks about women. And so we got to talking about that, and I got this lovely gift in the mail. So I just love when people think, practically like that, and just remember a conversation by sending you something that's so encouraging. So anyway, I wondered, when did you and your husband realize you would not be having children? Because I know that the conversation started out a little bit about your life, but I know the listener knows that this platform was created for the childless not by choice, and about the childless not by choice demographic. So let's head into those questions, because you mentioned that that's how we got to talking. We realized we both didn't have children. We wanted children. So when did you and your husband realize you would not be having children?
Well, actually, I started having some real physical problems and a lot of real extreme pain during my menses. So I went to my
Mm-hmm.
doctor, and basically he told me I needed to have a hysterectomy.
Mm.
And by that time, Hank and I had been married for maybe 10 11 years, I guess.
Mm.
And so it's not as though we stopped ourselves from having any children. We weren't on birth control. I just wasn't getting pregnant.
Mm.
And I went to another doctor to make sure that this was a good diagnosis. And he said, well, there are other options. And he named them. And I said, well, what's the bottom line? And he said, well, the bottom line is you need a hysterectomy. So I went back to my doctor and we uh, planned the date. And
Yeah.
so Hank and I, talked about it. And I mean, it's not as though we had stopped getting pregnant for any reason. And his message to me, which I just treasure, two important things happened before my hysterectomy.
Mm-hmm.
One was that Hank said to me, he said, Maureen, they're taking out a diseased part of your body. It has nothing to do with who you are.
Mm.
And I just so treasured that. I knew it was true, but it was very good to hear him say that.
Definitely.
And then when I was young, I had established a personal relationship with God. And so throughout my life, that relationship with God has been growing. And during this time, in fact, it was the first time I ever heard God speak to me, not out loud, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of in my ear. I don't,
Right.
in my heart, I don't
In
know.
your heart. Yeah.
But he said to me, so Maureen, your life is going to be different, but it's not going to be bad.
Mm.
And so I carried those two things in with me as I went to have that procedure, which meant I would not have any children.
Right.
We decided actually after that, we did talk about whether we should adopt, but Hank in particular felt that God had given us plenty of time to get pregnant if that was the path he wanted us to take, but
Mm.
um, that maybe it was not the right thing for us to have children.
I just think that's a beautiful thing, because and correct me if I'm wrong, as a single woman, I have a different kind of pressure on me to be childless. But another family member told me just recently, and this family member is in your age group, really, and she told me that
That means
she
I'm
doesn't have
older
children
people.
either. Pardon?
That means I'm older people.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
That's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you, because I've always wanted to be able to interview someone that was older, who was childless, not by choice. So there's nothing, the age is just a number, but it means experience. And I just wanted to hear your life experience. And, just let me tell you, the fact that you can have a husband who would say that to you, that's what this family member said to me, the person said that if they were married, they would probably have felt a little bit more pressure because they did not get to have the children. But being single, you don't have the pressure of wondering how your husband feels about you, or if your husband wasn't strong enough to say what your husband said to you, how would the marriage last? Would it survive? And obviously, yours survived because your husband is such an intelligent man. And so I
And
just,
this week we celebrated 46 years of marriage. So
how many years?
46.
46. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thanks.
Happy anniversary to you all.
Thank you.
And you see, it's lasted because, you were both on the same page. You both have the same a relationship with God and with Jesus. And so I just really applaud your husband for saying that. And this is the kind of message I'm trying to get out to listeners around the world, especially to men, and especially as we approach Father's Day. I'm working on some Father's Day content right now. I mean, it's tough to be a man around Father's Day, I believe, just as with no children, just as it would be for women. We just recently celebrated Mother's Day. And for me, that's still a tough day. And I remember when you and I were talking first, you told me something that kind of just was like a light bulb moment. It was like, duh, why did I never think about this? But one of the things you told me was that you just don't go to church on Mother's Day.
Yeah, that's really true because, well, it depends on the church, but
Hmm.
if they're only honoring mothers or grandmothers or, who has the most children, I just didn't need to,
Relive that.
yeah, live with that because
Yeah.
I'm really okay with the fact now that I don't have children.
Hmm. But why sit through something you don't really particularly need to or want to? And
Right.
yeah, and I just never considered that I don't think that God is going to punish me if I just don't go to church on Mother's Day. And so I went to my mom's church this past Mother's Day because she had told me that at her church, they don't say, "Will the mothers please stand?" They just say, "Will the women please stand?" So,
Mm.
but that's not quite what happened this time around. They asked
Oh,
the
no.
mothers to stand. So I remember turning back and looking at her because I didn't get to sit with her because we had a lot of family that came to church for Mother's Day, which was just beautiful. So some
Yeah.
of my other family members sat with her and my dad, and I sat with some second cousins, and it was beautiful for these young men to sit with me. It made my day actually. And so I look back at my mom with this glare, mocking glare. I'm like, oh, I thought you said they don't celebrate only mothers here. She's like, well, I didn't know. That's not what
Yeah,
they did
yeah.
last time.
Don't you know? That sort of stuff always seems to happen.
Exactly. It's like, it would just be, this would just happen to me. So, but I am going to take you up on this next Mother's Day, God willing. I'm going to do something else. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, to be honest. And I
No,
thank you
I
for
don't
just,
think that. God doesn't keep a checklist of,
no,
well, one thing he doesn't need to because he's all knowing. So,
exactly.
but he doesn't work with us on the basis of how much good we have in our lives or have done. Nor does he does deal with us according to our mistakes. That's, I believe, why Jesus came, was to make a payment for the things that we had done wrong so that we could have a relationship with God. And when you have
Right.
a relationship, your dad um, would love you whether you made him angry or not because you're his child. And once you become God's child, then you're his child. He doesn't reject you or turn his back on you. He might discipline you,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't treat you like an outcast.
Exactly. True. Very true. And so, yeah, you gave me a really great light bulb moment, and you gave me a little bit of freedom. I don't know if you realized that or not, but it was very freeing. I'm working on it, but I'm not a big outside of the box thinker, and so it just never occurred to me. So, thank you for that.
Well, you're quite welcome. I'm glad that happened.
So, wondering, do you and your husband come from large families, and how is the family interaction? Or how
Um,
was it in the beginning, at least?
when I had to have the hysterectomy.
Yes, yes.
Well, first of all, Hank is one of four children, and I am one of three.
Okay.
So we didn't have huge families that we came from. Um, Nor did my siblings have a lot of children.
Okay.
Hank's family, on the other hand, there's more of them and they've had more children. But
Hmm.
my parents and my mother and father-in-law, you know, they were very kind and understanding, and knowing that this was a difficult time for Hank and I, and they didn't ever say anything degrading,
Hmm.
or I'm sure they were sad. I'm
Right.
actually sad that Hank didn't have children, because he would have been a great father.
Mm.
But he accepts it. And does he get sad on occasion? I'm sure he does, but he's got nephews and nieces, and he's very good with friends' kids and stuff like that. Whereas
Mm.
I'm a little bit not as good with kids as he is. So
Well, I'm sure you would have been.
our parents and family, I think, were quite understanding.
That's good though. That's wonderful because sometimes it can go the other way and it can just be, a lot of pressure for something you have no control over. And I wanted to go back.
That's true. Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah. I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier too. I'm glad I didn't forget to mention that, but many times in this podcast I have said to the listener, get a second opinion. So when
Hmm.
you were telling me about the first doctor you went to, I was sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I hope she got a second opinion. And then you said, I went to another doctor, and I said, yes, she got a second opinion. So it's just so important to not, do the first thing you hear. It's so important to get a second opinion. So I was glad to hear that you did
Yeah,
that.
I really agree with that. In fact, I had a very good doctor, but I went to the man who was the top in his field,
Hmm.
in that field. And he said, there are these other options, but the bottom line is you need a hysterectomy. And then I found out he had mentored my doctor. So
Oh.
I felt very good about the decision to go ahead. And I had such excruciating pain that really I didn't have much of an option.
Mhm. Okay, well, I'm glad that you did what you had to do and that you did get the second opinion. And you tried, you tried your best to make sure you had the right options before you're just making a decision. And that's another important thing
Mm.
that I ask listeners around the world to consider. I know that we are all living in different parts of the world, different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds, but I always say just do the best you can with where you are. And so that's the message again here. Um, so you mentioned your husband, told you this gave you this little package of words that you've held on to all these years, and that you think maybe he does feel a little bit of sadness from time to time. But do you ever remember, if you look back, that it was a journey to a place of acceptance, or was it pretty immediate, or somewhere in between?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think the acceptance was immediate,
Okay.
but then after the choice of
Hmm.
having the hysterectomy, after the procedure was done, there are still moments when you have to deal with the decision that you made.
Right.
I don't have any doubt that we made the right decision, that I needed to have this surgery, but um, there still comes emotional feelings
Hmm.
as a result of that. So, it's like, oh, forgiving somebody for something they've done to you. You may forgive them, but when the memory comes back, it's like you have to forgive them again. Not that
Yes.
you didn't forgive them before, but it helps you deal with the feelings. And so when I feel sad watching kids, or I just have to go back and say, you know what? my life is different, but it's a good life.
Yes, just like God said.
Just as what God said to me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's amazing that you just said something that resonates with me here now, because I remember when I finally made the decision, I held on for 10 years. I
Hmm.
had three myomectomies, which for those who are not aware, myomectomy is fibroid removal. So I had three of those surgeries, including one of those was a robot surgery,
Wow.
where so they wanted to be less invasive and they went in with a robot. But after 4 hours of making their way through scar tissue, they never got to the fibroids. So it was kind of a wasted surgery. And
Wow.
so I have little scar. Well, they're not ugly, but they're scars on my stomach where the robot went into my stomach,
Hmm. Hmm.
in four different places and into my belly button. I'm sorry for being graphic, but that's what the surgery was. And so the reason I'm bringing it up is, after all of those surgeries and then finally making the decision to have the hysterectomy, I had about a month before the hysterectomy date, and I kept going back and forth in my mind, and I had to keep making myself not call and change or
Hmm.
cancel the surgery. And then after the surgery, and my doctor had already told me, Sevilla, I know that this is not what you wanted, but your quality of life is going to increase exponentially. And he was right. He was right, but I still questioned my decision sometimes, a year or two after the surgery. I wondered if I did the right thing, if I didn't trust God enough, if I didn't wait long enough. But then I told myself, you waited 10 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Sometimes, sometimes you can't logic yourself out of it. Sometimes you can.
Right.
And it was a decision made, and it was a wise decision made in the moment, and you
Hmm.
can't undo it.
Yeah, you can't undo it. It's already done. And I don't have accidents every month anymore, and I don't have, a bloated stomach anymore, and back pain,
Hmm.
things like that. So it was the right decision, but I just brought it up because you said how you kind of struggled with it even after you did it. And so yes, the thought comes back once in a while to me too, and it's amazing. And not so much anymore, but especially in the first couple of years, I wondered if I ever. It was a battle. It was an internal battle.
Mm-hmm.
So, just as we finish up here, what suggestions would you have for women struggling with childlessness?
Well, I think that my first answer is there an emptiness that you're trying to fulfill by having a child? And you can't, so you're still feeling empty. But even if you had a child, even if you had all the money you wanted, even if you had everything you thought you wanted, even, you would still feel empty because the emptiness is a thing that I think God put in us so that we would look to Him. People fill themselves with sometimes with promiscuous relationships, sometimes with friends. They fill their lives with drugs or alcohol, any number of shopping, any
Hmm.
number of things to try to fill the empty hole that they feel. And yet, it's only a relationship, a personal relationship with God that meets that emptiness in your life.
Hmm.
And frankly, that's really my answer. That you can get busy in doing other things, but you still might feel that emptiness. And there are other ways of having children, watching and taking care of nieces and nephews, of adoption. There are a number of ways of having children, even if you can't personally. But the bottom line is that there is a void in our lives that we keep trying to fill, and it can only be filled by God. There
Hmm.
was a physicist and philosopher, Pascal, who lived about the time of the French Revolution, and he said there is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every person that cannot be filled by any created thing, but only by God the Creator, made known through Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
That is really the truth. My satisfaction, my passion in life, my fulfillment in life all comes as a result of the fact that I have a personal relationship with God. And He is the one that fills my life. And therefore, my relationship with my husband is better. I have good, deep friends. It's all a result of Him being vitally involved in my life.
Hmm.
Don't
Very
mean don't
beautiful.
mean to preach, except I think it's the truth.
Well, of course, and that's why I asked the question because and that was so very beautifully said, and I believe it will touch the heart of someone as they really think about why. I mean, I do a lot of research because on this platform there's a lot to research when it comes to childlessness not by choice, and
Of course.
there are a lot of women who don't want children, and I've interviewed at least one of them in my podcast, and then there are women who are okay with it. And as you were just talking, I just got to thinking, I said, we can get to a point where we're okay with it, which is where I want this platform to take women. I want you to be okay with it, not that you're going to get to the point where you said, well, I don't want children, I don't want them anymore, or it's okay that I didn't have them. That's not what I think I'm hearing from you. And I don't think that's where my heart is. I've always wanted children, but I want to get to the point, and I want to get the platform, the people in the platform, to the point where we can live a relevant, joyful, and fulfilled life, although we didn't get to have the children. But your question of asking yourself why you really wanted to have the children is a great question. It's a great question because a lot of times the answer may be because society wants me to have the children. And that's not a good enough reason to want children. And so I just really appreciate you saying that. That wasn't preachy at all. I think it's going to make us think some more. Before we close out here, though, did you have anything else that you wanted to add? And if anybody wanted to get in contact with you, is there a website or any way that people can get in contact with you?
Um, there
If
is
not, that's okay. But yeah.
there's a way you could get a hold of me would be through there's a right now there's a website going on called well, let me give you the one that this is going to www.magdalenatoday.com is a current website where you can find out more about the film I was talking about. There's another series called Rivka as well. There's an app called Jesus Film Media. Look on your app store. You could do that. At magdalenatoday.com, you could write and say, I heard your podcast. I would like to be in touch, and I will get that message from that website.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll drop this information into the show notes, so the listener can just go over to the show notes, or depending on where you're listening from, you might have to scroll across. If you're listening from Overcast, if you're listening from iTunes or some of the other apps that you listen to your podcast on, the show notes will be below the player. It'll be below the player on my website. And as many of you know, the all of my episodes are on the website, childlessnotbychoice.net. But all of that information will be in the show notes, so I'll be sure to add it there. And
And excuse me, on Facebook,
sure.
there is a Magdalena Today
Oh, okay.
page. And so that might be another way of getting in touch.
Okay, Magdalena Today on Facebook. Okay. All right, so I'm adding that in now. And I really appreciate you, again, taking the time to speak with us today. Did you have any final words, anything that you wanted to make sure that we Got on tape.
No, this no thanks. This is just great. I so deeply appreciate you asking me to be here. And I'm happy to share my story because I really have lived a very good life.
That's wonderful, and that's going to be a deep word of encouragement to the young women out there who are struggling to figure out what their life will be like and how to deal with all of this. So I really appreciate your time today, Mrs. Maureen, and I look forward to speaking with you more in the future. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you. Until next time, have a good one. Bye.
Bye.